5 of them.
I call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, October 14th, 2019, and the time is 7 o'clock p.m. Dr. Hillman, there are just a few items in the table file.
Yes, we just had a very limited table file this evening. We have one personnel item and a gift agreement, and then also just a item for information that the National Merit Reception will be scheduled on November 12th at 6 p.m. right here in this media center. Of course, that precedes the November 12th board meeting. So that's the table file for this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. If there's no objection, we'll add these items to the agenda as we move forward. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Jeff. Is there a second? Second by Rob. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We now have an opportunity for public comment. This is a chance for anyone residing in the Northfield Public School District, to address the board. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board? All right, seeing no one come forward, we'll move on to announcements and recognitions. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, I have 3 announcements this evening. The first is that about the American Choral Directors Association State Honors Choir. And we have 2 Northfield Middle School choir students who were accepted into the 2019-20 American Choral Directors Association State Honors Choir. Elizabeth Tracy, an ACDA 7-8 SSA Honor Choir, and Isaac Aladdin, an ACDA 7-8 TTB Honor Choir. Additionally, middle school student Emmett Norrie in the 7-8 TTB Honor Choir submitted his audition through Northfield Youth Choirs. The rehearsals and performance for these honor choirs will be on Saturday, November 16th at St. Andrew's Lutheran Church in Mattawamkeag, Minnesota. So congratulate to these students. Again, our students always perform well on a statewide stage when it comes to our music programs. The second announcement that I have today is pretty substantial. I'm very proud to announce that Post Consumer Brands is donating $25,000 to the school district to support our food programs. Now, this was part of Post Consumer Brands' 125th anniversary, which also coincides with the 100th anniversary of the local malto meal plant. And so Post Consumer Brands is celebrating nationwide. They're actually providing $250,000 in donations across the 10 communities that they have plants in. We had a chance to be part of the celebration on Saturday morning. They really were ahead of the game because on Wednesday, we were going to be in Ames Park. Then I think they saw the forecast and shifted it to the Dundas Dome. And so I had a chance to go and accept the big check on behalf of the district. I had a chance to talk with Post Consumer Brands Chief Executive Howard Freeman and some other folks from their team, local folks involved in that process as well. And really it was just a wonderful opportunity to hear how much Post supports hunger relief and other programs like this. So locally, we are spending some of the money to support $7,500 we're using to support the Northfield Area Learning Center Backpack Food Program. As I know that you're aware, that provides healthy and other kinds of food, nutritious food for ALC students to take home on the weekend. We know many of the students in that program are food insecure, and so just making sure that we can provide that help for them over the weekend. $7,500 in that program goes a long way. Hard to say it, but 16% of our ALC students identify as homeless right here in Northfield, Minnesota. So $7,500 for the backpack food program goes a long way. We are also putting $7,500 into the Child Nutrition Angel Fund program. And again, we know that in Minnesota, if you qualify for free or reduced lunch, your lunch is free because the state of Minnesota covers the difference between the reduced lunch price and the federal free lunch price. But we still have a number of families who are right at that line or just above, struggling to make ends meet, and the Angel Fund program really assists them with helping their children get healthy meals here at school. And then the final $10,000 is going to be allocated to the Greenville Park Community School program, and it will support the community school grade level dinners for the next 5 years. So that means that there's an additional $2,000 of the grant that we get from the federal government every year that can go to other programming as opposed to supporting those community community school grade level dinners. So really fantastic. That's a great way to have a value add because not only do we get to cover those dinners, but we get to do additional programming as a result. So I expressed our profound appreciation to Post for thinking of us. I want to thank Val Murderstorff, our finance director. The initial call came to her, and she's doing all the work to make the finance portion work. So you will actually accept the gift at a future board meeting, because we got the big check, but we thought maybe we could take the picture of it with that little app you can have on your phone, but we figured it was too big to be able to scan that check in. So we'll wait till we get the real one. And then just my final announcement this evening, I just want to introduce board members to Letitia Eady. Letitia's in our audience here today. She works in Robbinsdale Public Schools, and she is doing a superintendent internship through St. Mary's University, and she's spending several days with me this semester garnering her superintendent hours. She's been here all day, and she'll be here through the board meeting tonight. So I just want to introduce board members to Letitia.
Welcome.
Those are your announcements for this evening.
Excellent. Do board members have other announcements? I think I would like to, on behalf of the board, acknowledge the number of students we have in the audience tonight from, I'm guessing, Sarah Swan McDonald's Global Studies. Excellent. Well, we understand it's been a probably very busy day for you, so we appreciate you being here, and we just encourage you to stay as long as you can, but we understand you may not be here for the duration, so welcome. Okay. So we can start with then the agenda items. Our first agenda item, Technology Services Update. Kim Brisky, Director of Technology Services, will update on current technology projects in the district. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you. Good evening. It's good to be here, so thank you for having me for this update. I will say I reread my narrative, and one of the things that I was feeling very confident about coming in here tonight is that we're not in the process of looking for new devices for teachers or for students, and you might have noticed a little slip in there. There's not a process right now for selecting our next student devices. We have brand new ones that you'll see a little bit in this presentation, and they are working exceptionally well. So as always, I always start with our mission. The Technology Services Department does not exist for any other reason but to serve the mission of this school district. And so as a team, we aspire to function as a skilled, cohesive, and reliable team who are responsive to stakeholders and provide technology services in a professional manner. And of course, that's all in service to the bigger mission of our district, to deliver educational excellence that empowers all learners to engage in our dynamic world. And we realize it is dynamic. So a little shout out to our technology staff. This is our current technology staff on the screen. Nate Knutson, our network manager, has been here for some time now. Matt Roy was here in a different role, took kind of a next step up in another district, and now came back for another step up and is now our network assistant, and just joined us this year and has been doing awesome. Chris Nessett, Student Information Systems Specialist, kind of the guru of that area, even in our region. Just a strong performer, definitely contributes so much to this district. Sandy Feldy, John Moan, and Michael Mary round out our staff as our technology specialists, and they are the hands and feet on the ground in the schools, getting to all the needs that our teachers are having. They see the things happening in classrooms and in the offices, and respond very quickly, and also bring back to our team what we could maybe do to make things more efficient for our buildings. So we just have this rock star team that works to support new devices. They go above and beyond to learn new systems that they will never ever use for their own good, just so that they can train people on them. And then they troubleshoot. We do this together, new equipment and processes that we have to figure out for the first time and then figure out how they're going to work. And so we are very fortunate to have that team. Just some of what they've done, or what we've done this year. Of course, we collaborate with our district departments, so you will start to see around in several of our schools some digital signage going up, so monitors that show information during evening events or even during the school day. Greenville Park has a couple up and running right now. There are already a few in the cafeteria and the kitchen here at the high school, and we're going to expand that a little bit. There will be one in the lower caf for concessions and sporting events as well. The middle school is getting a few, and then maybe most exciting there, we installed a camera at the back of the auditorium that will stream to the music rooms and potentially to that cafeteria area at the middle school what is happening in the auditorium, so that people who are waiting outside could maybe go in at the time that's appropriate for their choir or whatnot. So that's pretty exciting. A lot of different tech installations. I mean, those could be wiring, they could be computers. We get to that a little bit later on too. And then staff training, which I'll also talk about in a little bit. Just this year, our team has responded to 550 tickets in our help desk system, which there are many that don't enter that system ever, but within a day we get to things that are in that system typically. So that's a pretty decent response time. So the summer projects, so I think the last time I was here was in the spring. We have received our new iPads, rolled them out to staff and students. Most of our staff and students had them in hand by the time that school started. So we had a couple hundred to go with our middle and high school students, and that all went very smoothly. We moved the old iPads out. Of course, those were purchased. We are still finalizing the last details on how many and what in working order went out and getting the last payment. We received the bulk of that already. Wi-Fi improvements. We did about $75,000 of Wi-Fi upgrades across the district. Most of those are at the high school for this summer in the D, H, and S wings. That work is still going on, but also in the middle school 6th grade area. And then Bridgewater is getting some pretty decent improvements right now too. That is ongoing, and also that work does qualify for E-rate funding, so we will receive about $42,000 of that expenditure back from the E-rate program. New lab computers went in here at the graphics lab, the engineering lab, and also the business lab. So really our specialty labs, not the ones that kids are coming. These have been replaced recently that kids come to use during times or classrooms check out just for kind of general use. But those really specific use ones that are giving our students really industry standard access to programs like the Adobe suite for our design classes and such. New copiers and paper cut server. We have installed new copiers around the district and changed our strategies a little bit to try to streamline the process and make efficiencies in our paper usage and in the cost per print. So that's been a big project and some different systems changes with it, but going very well. Bridgewater Gym had their projector installed on the ceiling, so they now have a system that they can use for presentations in that gym space. It will be nice to go over on their Veterans Day celebration and see that in use with a nice new sound system and quality speakers and a presentation system with their projector. Tightrope digital signage, I already mentioned that a little bit, and then we've had a few office staff computer updates as well. That was the bulk of our summer work. As I mentioned, that collaboration with other departments goes a long way. These projects overlap. Of course, I work closely with Mary Grace Hansen and teaching and learning initiatives, and with Hope Langston. We all kind of cross on some of these things. A few of them are listed there. The college and career readiness work, that continues to be something that to coordinate for the number of kids to get where they need to go and to get the right content out. I've done some work with both of the steering committees at the middle school and here at the high school, just to make sure that we can get the right materials into the hands of the teachers and the students. Accessible learning materials cohort, this is a new endeavor that is collaborative with Lori Warner is the one that started this off, but Mary Grace Hansen, Sean Dubé, English teacher at the high school, Carrie Duba, school psychologist, and Angie Lynch, that was our last one, right? Mm-hmm. Thanks, going by memory here. Special education teacher, and I all attended on this past Wednesday to really learn more about making all of our instructional materials more accessible for all learners. So this could be voice assistance, this could be subtitle assistance, this could be selecting materials that already have applications that function well with accessibility features of an iPad, pieces like that make not only for students who are on an IEP or a 504 plan, but for all students, because those strategies tend to be supportive of all students. And so from website to communications to learning materials, so it's a good endeavor. Also, the Northfield Enact group will continue this year. We need to get that up and running, but we will do that as well. So that's the professional development and then classroom innovation grants that we've been able to provide with the old DCSDC committee and the old tech steering committee kind of combined in an effort there. I mentioned the print and copy services. I cannot thank Val Murdesdorf enough for her work on orchestrating that change, and we have been collaborating with the business office there. And then also the time clock system that has come in, a lot of troubleshooting on our tech staff side to say, how can we make the kiosks work so that people can punch in and things like that. So these are the things that come up that our district needs to work. They're not very glamorous and they have to function. And so the importance of them is very, very high. Buildings and grounds, of course, we do a lot of updating of spaces and AV installations together. So that top screen is actually today's Greenville Park, one of the slides that was rotating through their digital signage. So students, as they're eating lunch or in the cafeteria after school with Kid Ventures, can see the goal getters and the students who have been recognized for an award in the previous month, the character trait of the month, the weather, the time, things like that, but the upcoming celebrations that they have in their school, things like that. So it is kind of a nice piece for gathering spaces to see that display of what's going on in school. And then the bottom picture, perhaps you've been in this space, that's middle school, room 139, which was a computer lab up until the summer, and Buildings and Grounds did an immense amount of work with a little bit of support from technology to get in a few different displays and make it a good space to use for groups. And then of course we have a few construction projects going right now, so there's an area for collaboration. We're looking at new types of spaces in those projects, which is very exciting. So things like flex labs or common spaces that have digital displays that allow students to work in small groups or allow teachers to take a class to a space that would accommodate a special activity. Lots of work to pick what's going to go into each of the classrooms. Of course, work with teachers and with building leaders. The upper picture there is what a projector could look like. That's not all determined yet, but against a whiteboard that you could just write with an actual marker, but still have whiteboard space for when you're not projecting. And then, of course, at Bridgewater, lots of work going on there to finalize. So now we're into get the product here. It's all been ordered. It's coming in and being installed, even some of it this week. So things like the PA system and the bell system and the clock system and the monitors that will go into the office. And then of course we'll shift to the next phase of that project pretty soon. At Sibley, it's mostly big picture stuff right now, things like security, where do the cameras go, pieces like that, network connectivity in all of the spaces at the Sibley project. And then for Greenville, of course, we've got that project for the new Greenville Park, where we're really determining what should all of the equipment look like. So it encompasses every aspect of that new building. Our team is committed to ongoing learning, so we want to support our teachers the best that we can, and also our own staff to continue our own learning. And so this summer we did hold the Summer Learning Series again for 3 days in August. We had about 25 sessions plus a couple of individual coaching sessions that people could attend, and we had a pretty good turnout. So I think all of our sessions had some attendees, which was great, and some of them had upwards of 20 or so, which was really great to see. This is a picture of Andy Leiser from Hastings, and he came in and presented on creativity, a lot of use of multimedia tools on the iPad, and some things that teachers hadn't seen yet that allowed them to go, oh, I could do this with my students in my classrooms. So that was a summer learning series. Working with building media right now to also provide some optional trainings in each of our schools that teachers can choose to go to before or after school. We will again have some JAMP training. That's our management system for our mobile devices and for all of our Mac computers. We have been able to do amazing things with that software. Things like the new iPad operating system or a new iPhone OS just came out. We've blocked that for the time being because it has a couple of glitches and not working with every piece of software yet. My own iPad kind of broke down in the update. I had to restore it and it's fine. It's up and running again, but we don't want that for, say, 10% of our kids. That would not be a good situation. So we get to wait it out a little bit because of that software and go, let's get all of the kinks worked out before we update. So Matt Roy will be attending their national conference coming up. It's held in Minneapolis, which is very convenient for us. And then again, the Sourcewell Conference, which used to be called TIES, something that we've attended each year. We'll look to send another group to that this December. As far as classroom practices go, this is where my passion lies, to get the right tools in the hands of our teachers and our students and to support them well enough to actually use them in their classroom to improve the student learning. And so our tech team does a lot of work to support many, many resources, and they could be the big district picture things like Schoology or Seesaw that are to every kid, or an iPad with management or whatnot, or they could be teacher-selected classroom-level tools or individual tools that some students are needing because of a specified reason, and we will look into all of those tools and support them. So I would say the use of digital resources has continued to increase, and we continue to find more that we go, you know what, this could be helpful, and then we do a little bit of vetting to go, how is it going to work? Are we going to be able to manage it? And then we bring them in, and we want all of the tools that are going to be helpful in the classroom to be accessible to our teachers and our students. So you can see this year one focus is Schoology for 4th and 5th grade. We started that last spring, working with teachers to start thinking about if we were going to move everyone from 4th through 12th grade to Schoology. So a parent comes into the district office and says, how do I keep up with what's going on in my student's classroom? We say, well, for kindergarten through 3rd grade, you've got Seesaw. For 4th through 12th, you've got Schoology. Let's help you get started. And we know exactly what the teachers will be using then. We have these technologies in place already, the Apple TV. You can see the iPad with the crayon in use there. That Logitech crayon is in use throughout the district all day long. And when you go into a classroom, you can see some kids just writing away on their notes. Some still choose to use their finger. They have learned to do that, and that's how they prefer to write. So you'll see a mix of it. I see quite a bit of use of that crayon, though, which is pretty fun to see. And then, of course, teacher laptops, we continue to support them, and they're going well. So we have these things up and running. We don't have an Apple TV in every classroom at this point. We do have teachers requesting them, so that might be a direction we look to move to allow for the wireless presentation from iPads or from teacher computers. But really, our goal is continuing to use the things that we have in place because we can leverage them to an even deeper level than we are right now. To continue to provide benefit to the learning environment. So we are starting to look towards fiscal year 21 for planning. Much of that planning includes construction projects, so I think the capital project list will remain pretty short. Also, the good news is we're in a really great place right now with having a really robust set of tools available to our teachers and students. So, ongoing support, ongoing training, ongoing learning and deepening our use of our current tools would be our current goal. So that's what I've got tonight. Thank you for your attention during that, and if you have questions, I would happily take those.
Kim, thank you. Amazing presentation always. That's right.
Thank you very much, Kim. Questions, comments from board members? No.
You had a slide that used the phrase ticket. I presume that's a work order or a request
Yep.
for a service.
Exactly.
Ellen?
So I had two questions. One was last spring you were talking about the keyboards and the, that we had a whole debate about when you were narrowing down in the device with the crayon. Can you tell us a little bit about where you ended up with providing the being able to check out keyboards and Chromebooks and that sort of thing?
Yeah, actually, checkout keyboards hasn't changed. It would be a good thing to go back and look and see if people want them at this point in time. So that would be something that I actually would like to go look back to. We haven't heard that request this year. We do have 300 keyboards that we purchased a few years back with our last iPad lease for our high school and 300 for the middle school. So those are in circulation in classrooms. And then we also purchased a new Chromebook cart for both the high school and the middle school. And those carts are, well, the carts are here. They're not set up with the Chromebooks yet. So those should be set up, though, maybe even still this week.
Absolutely.
And then I was curious, this is going way back to when we were first made the moves to iPads. We were talking about, that the students would have fewer and fewer textbooks to carry. And we knew that initially that was, it was going to be a long process. So can you tell us a little bit about where we are in that process?
Well, I don't know a number of classes that use or do not use a textbook or a comparison from who used textbooks before we had iPads and now does not. I can say that our math classes have an online option or a PDF option of the textbook for at least the bulk of them. I think there might be a couple, like maybe an AP Calc class that would have a textbook. Our biology classes use an online text. Our world history and our American history use an iBook. Even, my son is in 6th grade. He has one textbook that was checked out to him to bring home for the year, and then he has the content on an iPad to use during the school day. So you sometimes see the reverse of that, that they have the content on an iPad to access when they're at home, and then a class set of books. In this case, we have a book, and also the content is on the iPad. So I think there's a mix, and I think also there's a preference for a mix. So even when we just renewed our biology text, which is an online text, we renewed it for 5 years, along with 4 classroom sets of the book, so that they could have the physical text available for students who need that, or prefer that, or for an activity that they just want to use the physical book. So I think there's still a blend. Whether or not you need to take all of the materials is probably a change, I think.
I was just thinking with us not having as many lockers, that was kind of where I was curious, but thank you, that helps.
Excellent question. Amy?
Thank you for your presentation, and you've really done a lot this last year, and I'm very impressed with all the new iPads and the switching over. And my question is about the crayons.
Mm-hmm.
I know there was a little concern that they would get lost or broken or, disappear somehow, and I'm wondering if you found that happening or not, or...
We haven't seen a huge amount of loss yet. Actually, I have not had a single call about my crayon is lost, what do I do? So that, yeah, right. Thank you, Matt, for that knock on wood. So we'll see tomorrow, now that I've said that. No, I know that we had a couple of students who had damaged the tip of their crayon, and so went to the media center asking for a new one, but they had clearly caused the damage. I mean, I think it's pretty difficult to actually accidentally damage. I think it might have involved teeth. So I think that was pretty clear. And they were able to buy new tips, and so what the media center did was hold on to the crayon so it wouldn't have sharp points on it that would damage the iPad, and they said, we'll keep this for you. If you bring in the new tips, we'll give you your crayon back. And so that's what happened, and it was a very inexpensive way to get this working again. I had also a family that I know contact me and said that they found one by their house, so I retrieved it, and it's back to the student. So those are the ones I know of. I think it's been minimal. We anticipate a little bit of loss, and I feel pretty confident that actually most kids are using them enough that they want to have it, and so snap it back into the case.
Thank you.
Show people how it snaps in the case.
So my iPad is right here. It's got a little slot there. It just snaps right in, and it holds there. So you actually have to press it in, and it snaps. So it does have a nice little place to live within the case, and it closes up inside of the case when you take your iPad with you.
Excellent. Other questions? Rob?
So I guess this is just relaying a question or a concern or a rumor that I heard from a teacher at Greenvale who said, my colleagues are worried that we're not going to have smart boards. We've heard we're not going to have smart boards in the new building, and so I'm just wondering what the status of the technology in the new building and whether that rumor is true and how, what's going on there.
I've also heard that rumor. In what I've heard from multiple people, I did participate in all of in the Greenville Park Core Planning Group, and also in some of those user groups. And in those meetings, we did talk very openly about not moving forward with smart boards. There was a potential, we've kind of held out 2 options to look at. One of them is something that Robert Garcia is currently using. I thought I maybe had a picture, but I don't think I put that in. It's a TV screen that is on wheels, and I don't think I have it, sorry. Anyway, it's on a cart, so it's mobile, and he moves it to use with small groups or as a whole class instruction. It's large. And he likes that. His smartboard is out of his room voluntarily. Another option is like what I showed with a short throw projector on the wall that would go onto a whiteboard space, so you could use that space actually as a whiteboard during the day. Now there are a couple of things to take into account, and the decision's not final at this point. We will need to finalize it in January or so and make the orders of our equipment. But the smart board runs about $2,500, so you can multiply that by each teaching space in Greenville Park. and then you cannot use that space for anything else. And what the smart board enables is interactivity at the front of the room for a teacher and or a student or two at the same time at the front of the room. And what we have with this device is an ability for, we won't get rid of the software even if we don't have smart boards. So you would still have smart notebook. And smart notebook can still make an interactive presentation, and it can send it to an online site where a student joins with a code, and then they have the interactivity on their device as well. So we can take something where one or two students would go up and solve a problem to something where every single student could, or on passing a teacher device, we now have the ability to write very neatly on an iPad and to have that project. And so I think the opportunity to take that moment of interactivity with the content from a couple of people to all of the people, that's my biggest reason to move away from something like a smart board. I'm not beholden to that idea. I struggle to justify the cost of that technology, which is aging in the technology that it is, and is also aging in the pedagogy changes that we've seen.
Yeah, I guess I would just be concerned that for the teachers who have gotten comfortable with one set of technology, that they understand that it's move out of comfort to something that's actually an improvement, and that they, so that it's not, something that's they think of as, we've spent all this time learning how to use this and now it's being taken away from us or whatever. So
I
think
appreciate that.
Getting the teachers engaged in that process would be.
I will go back to, I think that they have been engaged in this conversation through the core planning and through the user groups where that was pretty clear with Principal Richardson and in conversations with me about what will the technology look like. Neither one of us said we're making the decision. I will say that. And neither one of us said, well, this is what it's going to be. We did some looking at what others have. Even in one of our tours, one of the teachers said of a classroom that we saw prior to even having any plans for a Greenville Park, said, oh, look how they have like a clock on their smartboard, and it was like an actual physical moving clock that they had like taped to the board. And I said, well, that's because it's not a smart board, it's an actual board, and they just are projecting against that clock and changing the hands. So there are opportunities, I think, to look in a new way, and I think they don't need to be burdensome for our teachers either. And I think the content that they have already created will still be useful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent questions. Jeff?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. One question I had was, in terms of technology is a great thing, and we want to make sure that kids are using these for tools, but I'm also concerned about communication and just being able to even sometimes actually talk to each other and turn the phone off. So it's kind of like, I know that screen addictions and a lot of different things like that. It's kind of like, are there any best practices or overusage things that we can encourage kids not to, only, also when I walk around town, I see so much of just kids, looking at their phones and just all they do is take pictures of each other. But technology is a great thing, but also is socialization and talking to each other. So I'm just, I'm hoping that, we're giving these devices to these kids for tools to learn. So, but also at the same time, how do we, use that and monitor that as an advice piece for best practices to be responsible adults.
First and foremost, I think we model that as responsible adults. Second, I will say this is like the ongoing thing as a parent that I also address in my own home, and am a very big advocate of using a screen when it provides the right benefit or the right entertainment at a level that is not impeding other social endeavors or fresh air. Now, I think school-wise, we do a number of things to limit the use of these devices, and I think if you go out into the public and look at kids out and about on their devices, they're probably not on this device. They're probably on this device. And they're probably taking pictures of themselves. not even each other. This doesn't have an app store on it. And there are times when I have wished we have an app store on this. And at the same time, there's some limitations to what you can do. Like your Snapchat is not on this device. And so that becomes less of an entertainment appeal, I think. And then I think also the technology is not going away. It is not going away. And so we will have this for the rest of our lives. And I think also look around at the adults that we see downtown and what is the example we're setting. And then we go, oh, these kids are on their devices. And the adults are as well. And I think it's a problem. I agree with you that socialization is a very, very high priority. And I think it's changing the way that people socialize. As far as our own devices, I feel pretty confident that they are, I know that there are times of misuse, but I feel like the bulk of our use is academic in nature. And when we know of a problem, we have a very great ability to step in and support. And so if teachers see a student who is misusing a device or distracted by something very frequently, we tend to step in and make some individual restrictions for that student through our management system and work with that student's parents.
Can I just add to that, Jeff? As I walk through the high school each day, a week ago, interim principal Laura Kay and I did a number of classroom visits together. And I think if you're in our school and you're going through our hallways, what you will see with the iPads is you will see very rarely students operating the way that you described. They are not working in isolation. So just outside of our district office, we have multiple world language classrooms. And it's at least twice a day when we walk out there where there are students working together. Today I was able to show off a little bit of my aged French with a few students outside that they're using their iPads to record themselves, to hear it back. They're using it to record each other and to provide feedback. As we go through, as you've seen us, as Ellen had referred to, we've removed a number of lockers and have put in benches and other kinds of places for students to collaborate. When I see students using the school-issued device in my daily travels through the school, it's actually the opposite of what you see with phones, right? Because most of the time it is collaborative. It could be that they're reading a textbook, it could be that they're interacting with an online assessment, but most of what I see is collaborative or the note-taking. I was very pleased in the 10 classrooms that we visited, in almost every class where they were taking notes or where the teacher was presenting, most students had the PowerPoint presentation downloaded. More than half of them were using their crayon to take notes as they were going, and no one provided any special instruction. The kids just understood and knew how to use it. And so we know that the kids are really leading the way with this. But I think what we see in coffee shops and things with everyone, it's not just kids, right? It's the adults in terms of how people use their phones. I would argue, based on my observation each day, it's different because we see kids using the tools as collaborative. Now, I'm not going to say that they still don't use their phones in school for that, one-on-one kind of thing that you see out in the public. But when they're using our school-issued devices, for the most part, as we've observed them, it is for the exact kind of collaborative nature that we have been hoping for, and it keeps getting better all the time.
Thank you, Dr. Hillman. I appreciate those comments because it's actually, it's true to what I see. I've been walking, just kind of looking for some tech use examples in the last few days and stepping into several classrooms, just kind of looking at what's going on. And you do see that. And I actually, in that time, I don't believe I have seen a student that has been off task on their device. It's probably happened. I just didn't catch it.
I'm fairly certain it's happening.
I am certain it's happened as well.
Before we had
as a high school
kids
teacher,
were off task. So,
it's true.
No, you had a question.
Thank you for your presentation. Does the district experience hacking at data?
Matt, can you knock on wood again? We have not. We have quite a few protections in place to prevent hacking. Is it possible still? Yes. Does it cause a little bit of fear for me? Yes. But I'm pretty confident in our networking and our data privacy.
And I think a lot of that, Noel, has to do with a number of the systems that you see that small cities especially have had trouble with. When you really read how those have played out, they are still trying to manage a number of those systems on site. Many of our big systems are actually, we outsourced them years ago for the purpose of we wanted to have someone who that was all they were doing all the time. So for example, our entire finance system lives in Mankato, and it's the place that most school districts utilize, and that's what that team of technologists do. They manage that software for finance and payroll and all those things, and it's their job to make sure that it is impenetrable as possible. So we don't have the tools or the capacity to be that kind of level of expert. So what we do is we try to partner with people who are. So our student information system is off-site, run by a company that does just that for schools. So we have a number of times where we've partnered with people because we know we run a lean technology services team. When I came to the school district in 2009, when we had desktop computers and labs, in fact, at that time, we actually removed the wireless cards from laptops. Think about that. That's what the actual practice in the district was. We had 1/2 less FTE than we do now. Because if you remember, I came as a half-time technology services person and a half-time human resources director. In the 10 years, we've increased by 1/2 FTE and now have 3,500 iPads,
4,200
4,200 iPads, plus how many teacher laptops?
350.
So it's a testament to how effective our technology services team is, but we put them in charge of what they're really good at, which is making sure that equipment runs and does good things for kids. And for people, when we need that extra layer of security, we get some additional help from people who are experts in the field. And I think that has worked out actually quite well for us, because we don't have an interest in being complete security nerds, but we know people who are, and we want them to do that for us.
Thank you.
Great questions. Tom, do you have a question?
Are there websites that are blocked, and like YouTube, I think you have to sign in to view certain videos. Is that just on the school Wi-Fi, or if they take their iPad home, does it still block things?
At this point, we are not filtering on home Wi-Fi. We do filter our school Wi-Fi pretty heavily. I end up looking at things for work that I oftentimes end up going to my own data to look at, because I go, I need to see this and it's blocked. So our filter, I would say, is a little bit on the on the heavier side. We do get requests to open up. A lot of the things that we get requested to open up are things like URL shorteners, that somebody has sent out a form and they have shortened the URL to a little easy one. But for the most part, yes, we are filtering, and it catches a great majority. There are times where we test our filter a little bit, and it does a pretty good job. Now, YouTube, is it possible that somebody would come across an inappropriate video? It is possible. Is it likely? No. And is there a risk and a trade-off? Yes. And I think the benefit that we gain from YouTube with the content that is available to us there is so big. We do have students for whom we have blocked YouTube, and it has been a request from parents or from teachers, and we also, in that case, teach teachers how to provide content in a way that gets it to those kids. Mostly through embedding a video, so that they don't actually go out to the site, but they stay within Schoology or something like that.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments? I had one question. Interesting and I think really exciting to see the potential of Schoology down to 4th and 5th grade. And of course, my children are too old, never had access to Seesaw, but I understand it's really wonderful. And I'm just wondering, do you have a way of knowing how many parents we have accessing Seesaw and Schoology, and what that might look like?
I do have a way of knowing that. Of course, I didn't look at those numbers right before I came here, but parent engagement on Schoology is relatively low, and that is mostly our secondary students. Now, also, as a parent, you get a little weekly report, which that summary can kind of tell you, like, oh, your student has missed this, or has taken these assessments this week, and it gives you a little point to jump in and check some things. And I think also some of our parents who are check through their student account, which is harder to monitor as well, because we wouldn't know who is using that account. Seesaw has exceptionally high parent interaction, and our teachers can very easily see on both of those tools. Our teachers can very easily see if their roster, when they look at the roster of students, if they have parent connections that have been established. And so Seesaw has a very high usage rate. Most of those start at Ready, Set, Go Day. And also, because we have purchased the paid Seesaw for Schools for the past 2 years, those who already signed up are already connected to their student when they hit the next class, which this is the first year that we've had that benefit with Seesaw. Schoology does take a little more work up front for our parents to get going, and so to help with that this year, I did provide a paper copy by a classroom teacher for every kid in their class that had their parent access code. And our teachers are new to Schoology, so for 4th and 5th grade. So I sent them an email that said, I'm going to put these in your mailbox so that they will be there for Ready, Set, Go Day if you are ready to use them. If you're not ready, don't stress yet. Save them for October or for when you're ready, and let me know how I can be of support. So in order to help them go, even communicate out, how do I set up my account? The sheet had the instructions and had the code on it. So that was for 4th and 5th grade. And I did the same for 6th grade, since those students may not have been using it as 5th grade.
That's excellent, thank you. My one last question, how many students did you end up checking out iPads for the summer? Do you know a rough estimate?
A rough estimate would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000.
Oh my gosh.
1,900 to 2,000, something like that.
Excellent. Okay, and I'm really glad that Rob asked that question so that you had the dialogue about the smart board, because I think it's just a good example of the number of technology decisions that are being made with the new construction projects. And I know you and your team have been very involved in both core planning and user groups. So I just want to thank you for your time there, because it's a very important part of these new projects, and it really requires you to be involved in all 5 of them. So we appreciate it, and I think really just your whole presentation, we realize what unsung heroes your team is. So please tell them thank you on behalf of the board for the work that you do, and we'll look forward to having you. We won't see you as much as we did last year. We were just starting the student device refresh,
That line
so
will
we've
not
come a
be in
long
my
way.
next narrative.
But I think when we reflect on it going in, I think we're just really so pleased as to how that process came through and the decisions that were made, and hearing some of the stories around the Logitech crayon and how those are being utilized. It's just really exciting, and that the 3rd grade is one-on-one now, and so it's just so many really good things happening. So thank you so much. And we will have you back whenever you like to provide updates. We realize now we are a bit of a lull, but thank you for this update.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
if you think, I think if the board thinks back to when we first went to these devices in 2013 or so, and you think about the big productions that we did at the time, how labor intensive it was to roll out the devices. Julie makes a great point about kids coming in over the summer every Tuesday, just open for a few hours. And if you remember all of the planning and the coordination and the logistics that went into that, and how far we've come and how integrated in the system that it's become, it's really just a testament to the work that Kim and her team have done, as well as our teachers and our staff who have, you think you want to hit the ball out of the park in that first year, but really it's been those small improvements each year that have gotten us to the point where I think that people look and say, I'm not sure how we could do this without this anymore. And so I just really applaud people for those incremental improvements that we've made over time that probably have a bigger impact than if we had swung for the fences right away. So great job by Kim and her team, and thank you everyone for the engagement and good questions tonight.
Yes, excellent. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to our next item for discussion and report. We have Dr. Hillman will share a current concept plan that would support a late start to the school day for secondary students. Dr. Hillman.
So I just want to give you, I'm going to give you the benefit of seeing how we're going through this process. As you know, that one of my annual superintendent goals, based upon the feedback of the board, is to present to you a formal plan for how we would implement a later school start time. The plan is to be to you before December 1st. And so I'm just going to share some updates along the way so that you can see the process that we're working for. I just want to do a brief recap of how we got here. So as you know, a couple of times in the last 5 years, we've worked with local sleep physician, Dr. Brian Hoff. He's come and given several presentations to the board and also to our high school faculty, really around the very compelling medical research that talks about the biology of teenagers once they hit puberty and how their internal clocks change. You remember he's talked about the larks and the owls and how everybody's a lark and an owl, but that your internal clock shifts a couple of hours when you become, after you've gone through puberty, and then it shifts back in your mid-20s. It has to do with the way the body releases melatonin. It isn't that high school kids are lazier than they were when they were in 6th or 7th grade. It is just that their biology is changing. We know that teenagers are going through the most significant rewiring of their brain since when they were toddlers. And so we know that the whole body is changing, and medical science has just learned a tremendous amount about this. And so that research was compelling enough to where we formed a task force that was made up of teachers. There were board members, at least one board member on that committee. We had community members, we had parents, we had administrators. Dr. Hoff served on that committee as both a physician and as a parent in the district, really going through that research and saying, was the research compelling enough? I mean, would we want to be able to move forward with creating a technical plan? That group met 4 times, I believe, last spring. They had a visit from Dr. Ken Gregseth, who was the superintendent of schools in Edina when Edina made the change to a later secondary school start time in the late 1990s. Mary Grace provided a report to you in June, and you encouraged me to make sure that we kept moving it forward. So we have continued to move it forward. So really, the research and the work that we're doing is based upon this real compelling medical evidence that has been presented. At the same time, we absolutely understand that a change in any schedule has a dramatic impact on families, right? So if we all have our morning routines, and I don't know about you, but my morning routine is pretty sacred, and when we start talking about changing morning routines, that's a reality we have to consider. It's a thing that we have to just think about, that even though we have this real compelling medical research, we also have families who rely on us in terms of being able to have their children at school and time to be at work. And just those different kinds of family schedules in the morning. So we just absolutely have to recognize that, and that's why early discussion with families and letting families know that we've been thinking about this is important. I included it in a welcome back to school video that I sent to families in late August, and we've had the Northfield News has already done one article on it. We've spoken about it on KYM and radio. So we're trying just to make sure people know that we are thinking about this particular change. So when we think about transitioning this to how would it work, there were some criteria that I gave to the task force to look at, and as we've been looking at the concept plan of how would this work with start and end times, there are 4 criteria that I've been using to drive the way we've been looking at it. One is that the change should be as close to cost neutral as possible. So we aren't looking to spend more money on this, we're looking how to reorganize and be more efficient with the resources that we already have. What we know from medical research is that the secondary start time has to be at 8:30 a.m. or later to align with that research. And in something that I just saw the article before we came here today, the state of California's legislature passed a bill which the governor signed, I think he may have even signed it today, that over the next 3 years will require every secondary school in California to shift to a start time at 8:30 a.m. or later. So we know that there have been a number of school districts in Minnesota, including Edina and Wayzata, Winona, several other districts. Not a ton of them, we have to be very clear about that's not a lot of them, but we have just seen one of the larger states in the union mandate that, for all of their school districts. Now, you know how I feel about state mandates, so I'm not going to be at the Capitol lobbying for that, because we should have the control over it. The other thing that I've really learned as I've listened to folks is that elementary school start times really need to be similar to what they are now, because when we really listen to families, the folks who really have the biggest concerns about the morning routine are our elementary families. And so we've been trying to model concepts that would keep the elementary school start times roughly similar, or potentially even start a little bit earlier, which is some feedback that we've heard from families over the years. So as we've looked at how we would make this work, we are looking at it trying to keep those elementary start times as similar to as they are right now. That's what we're trying to model. It's not that it's a final product, but it's the early stages. The other piece that we just have to remember is we must satisfy the minimum number of instructional hours as required by the state of Minnesota. And so we know for secondary students that is 1020, and then of course it ratchets down all the way down to kindergarten. So that's another piece that we just have to make sure is that when we're putting together a calendar, or excuse me, a daily schedule, it has to meet the minimum number of instructional hours required by the state. And as you know, we exceed the minimum number of instructional hours that the state has put forward by quite a bit already. So we're in a very good position there. So I've just shared with you a very draft way that this could work, considering all of the different factors that come involved, just looking simply at the beginning and the end times of the day. So one way that we could make this work would be simply by having the elementary school start just a little bit earlier at 8:10, and then just, taking that day, the regular day, and manifesting it out so that it ends roughly the same time, it does in terms of the same number of hours of instruction. So if we did that, the elementary day would end at 3:10. Now, I want to be very clear that I know that the elementary schools, their starts are staggered just a little bit, so it is for modeling purpose only, so it's not like this is what it would be, but just in concept, that's how it would work. At the next piece, we would have the middle school could start at 8:35, and then if you just take that and extrapolate the current day out to the end, those students would get done at 3:35. And the high school, in that same model, would start at roughly 8:45 a.m. and then would finish at 3:45 p.m. Now, a couple of key things here is that our rural bus routes, as you know, they pick up all students kindergarten through 12th grade. And then what happens is when those rural bus routes come in right now, they drop off at the high school, they drop off at the middle school, then what they do is go out and do a neighborhood route for their elementaries and drop off at the elementary. So we're just using the same amount of time that it takes for the buses to currently doing that now, just in reverse. So we would continue to need to pick up all students kindergarten through 12th grade on the rural routes. Now, by changing that start time, we could actually get students to be picked up around 7:20 is what our estimates are at this point. Right now, the first bus picks up at around 6:50 or 6:55. We're still reviewing employee schedules because, of course, the student contact day is just part of the work day for our employees, and that's a part that we're still working through right now and determining what's the best recommended start times. So there are a number of other questions that we still are trying to determine. Special education and preschool transportation. We've done some pilot work with some preschool transportation. Does that model still work? We're still working through the bus company with that. That's an important piece for us to know. How much additional time, class time, would students, athletes miss to attend games, and on how many days? What I can tell you right now is that Director of Activities at the high school, Joel Olson, has shared that the average release time for an away match or game is roughly 1:11 p.m. Now, if you think about it in the spring, there are times where people have to leave quite early. Sometimes for some winter sports, depending on how far they're going, they have to be released earlier. Right now, that's about toward the middle of sixth period. If you just think about it, that would be some additional time that student athletes would miss. Now, we know on the flip side of that, we know that by students sleeping later, it provides a lot of positives for their athletic performance and for all of the other mental health things that we are trying to address in a number of different ways. So the question is, what's the cost-benefit analysis there? If student athletes who are signing up miss some additional class and they have the responsibility to make sure that they are following up and getting that instruction, that would be something that the board has to consider. Professional learning communities. We don't see a way where we would have it, if we were to start later than what we do now, we don't see a way where I could recommend to you that we start even later 1 day per week. I just don't think that that's a responsible thing to do. So thinking about how would we be creative in terms of looking at our professional community work, which we know has seen quite a bit of fruit at various parts of the system. And then questioning too, can the high school flex hour, which you have heard a lot of positive things about this year, could that still work with a later schedule? And without the flex hour, if we were to choose not to do that, how would the career and college readiness curriculum that we've embedded into that flex hour be taught? Again, that's just a question. There is a way most likely to do both, a later start and a flex hour, but that's a piece that is something that has to be answered and discussed. And so those are just a few of the kinds of questions that we're trying to work through. And there is some non-closure in this, right? Because until we were to have a formal decision to say we're going to move forward on this, even we can get as many of the details right up until then, but even after that, we know that there are going to be other details that we did not anticipate or people could not have seen coming forward. And when you're finally putting it into practice, that there will be some other things that would challenge us. So those are just a few of the questions that we have identified that we're continuing to make sure that we're researching. Our administrative team has been really asking some questions internally to begin with. Our next step would be after MEA, to where I'll be going to buildings and offering an opportunity to share this same document with our faculty and other staff to make sure that we hear their thoughts and hear their ideas. We will host in November at least 2 parent sessions for people to be able to come and ask questions about it at that point. And then my goal will be to have a plan to you, again, at that second board meeting in November. That doesn't mean that you have to act on at that point. You can continue to ask questions. You can, I would suggest that at some point we schedule a work session to make sure that that's the issue that we're focusing on, so that we have a chance for a real deep dive with it. So we will be continuing to work on this, but I wanted to share with you where we are at this point, because I've said that I would keep you informed based upon your direction to me to keep working toward a plan. And we've seen some districts, Wayzata, made a decision, and I think it was February, of last year. So we want to make sure that people know if it's something we're really concerned. We're trying to keep people informed about it right now so that they have a chance to weigh in. But there's also no magic to say you'd have to adopt the schedule for next year. You could certainly say, yep, that's something that we're really interested, but we want to push it one more year out. So there's an ample opportunity for people to think about it and to be able to reflect and to be able to adjust any practices that they have. Or of course, you could also say that it's not something that you're interested in. What I know I've heard is that we are believing in the ample medical research that is available, that physiologically this would be a very positive thing, especially for secondary students. And so we have to respond to that research when we have a chance to look at it. And so there are also lots of things that we have some good research on that we aren't able to implement. But this is one that we think we have a reasonable chance to implement that would have some real positive, both physical and mental and academic impact on students. And so I wanted to share where we are at, see if board members had any questions or concerns at just this state. I want to just reiterate, I wrote it draft, model, all sorts of things to make it that it's extremely tentative, but we've said we'd be transparent about this process, and that's exactly what this short discussion tonight is about. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any board members' questions or take any comments of things that you'd like us to make sure that we continue to research as we do this work for you.
Excellent, thank you. Questions, comments? Jeff?
Not that the Golden Crescent is always doing things right, but they're a lot bigger school districts. So Edina, Wayzata, Minnetonka, it almost sounded like 2 of those 3 have implemented an earlier start.
And Edina and Wayzata, that's right.
Okay.
I don't know about Minnetonka.
Okay, so it'd be interesting to see. I mean, we don't really comp that well necessarily with those biggest schools. So, I mean, I would just be interested to see who in the state has, say, an 8:30 start, and what are they doing, and that's a good starting point, to kind of check the pros and cons, in our area.
We know that one other Big 9 school has a late start, and that is Winona. So of course, they're quite a distance away, but they are the only other school that we're aware of in the Big 9 that has that. And again, I think that once we get outside of districts about our size, you're going to have a lot of variation. There are a lot of smaller schools that for years have had an 8:30 start. It was just the way that their busing systems work. My first teaching job for 8 years, the school that I worked at, we started at 8:25. That was the way it had been forever. So I think that when you think about, I agree about districts. We have not found a ton of school districts our size who have made this move quite yet. We know there's a lot of people who have had an interest in it, because of the compelling medical research that, really was started at the University of Minnesota. That's where the initial seminal research on the study or on this topic came from. So I think you're seeing some districts who are really wanting to look at it, and I think there have been a number of hurdles that people just have not been able to figure out quite yet. But we know there are other districts that are looking at it and considering it, and we are doing the same.
Other questions, comments? Rob?
I just wanted to address the bullet point under key questions about how much additional class time would student athletes miss to attend games and how many days, etc. I guess this is all just anecdotal, but from my experience of teaching at the college level, the student athletes are extremely good time managers, and this is something that's really ingrained in them. And I've actually had students who their grades have fallen off after the end of the season because they're like kind of slacking a little bit because they're so keyed up to succeed during the season. So I'm not so worried about that because I think it's something that maybe, we have good teacher coaches too, who can help students with those time management skills, which if they go on to be student athletes in college, they're going to have the same skills of time management. So I think that's actually an opportunity rather than a problem.
Yeah, we just want to be transparent about it because we know that any time that we dismiss students to miss academic time for other things, including, something that I think is really important, like high school athletics or high school other co-curricular opportunities, we just want to be transparent about and say that when we look at what the dismissal times were in the past, this is how much it would have affected those student athletes had we had this schedule in place before. We don't want you to have any surprises. And so I think that is the key, looking at how we can model, here's the schedules that we've had in the past. Now, I think the reasonable person would ask, well, why don't you just move the start times of the contests back? Well, I've learned that we don't actually have all that much control over that because those are set by the section, they're sometimes set by the conference. But what we know is if more schools look at this kind of schedule, we know that those athletic pieces will follow. And there are some people who would argue that you won't get any change in those systems until a handful of schools move to this kind of schedule because it's a chicken or the egg thing. Well, the systems adapt when there's this would be a disruption in the system. That's the only way to say it, right? When there's a systems disruption, what are the other things that follow along and adapt to follow that? So there's some thought that as other school districts look at this, a few do it, that those schedules might change as time goes on. And I've had some folks who say, well, when they get home from practice, they're just going to stay up later. And I think that's a very fair question. But what the medical research would say is it doesn't matter what time they get home. They are still, that melatonin is still going to release roughly at the same time. And so while to us as adults it makes logical sense that, well, if we get home later, we're going to go to bed later, what the medical research would suggest is that that's not how it would work with teenagers.
Right. So it's a question, it seems like, assuming the medical consensus is correct, that they're going to achieve more academically and they're going to perform better athletically, that you're losing a half an hour maybe, but you're also maximizing the performance during the time that you have. So it's kind of a trade-off there, and I think you probably win by it.
Yeah, and there's no other way to say it that there are some things that you will not know until you start it, right? That's part of the dilemma, is that, we're talking about the clock, right? And the clock, whether we like it or not, drives a lot of our lives. And when we change the clock, it does make a difference for people. So there are some things that until we really get into it, you're not going to know what the unintended consequences are. And so we're basing it upon what the medical research says, and then what people who have followed up with other behavioral research afterwards. And the one that is just continues to come back to me is Dr. Hoff will often share. A lot of the research really surrounds the Air Force Academy, where there's a real controlled environment. The other one, though, that has been really replicated across numerous states is that, and it's just one of those things that I think, oh, okay, that makes some sense, is that in school districts where there has been a later school start time, there has been a corresponding drop in teenager-involved car accidents. And, again, if you think about sleep research, if you are well-rested, or if you are not well-rested, your reaction time is diminished. And I'm always skeptical if it's one study, right? If you have one study and one, but this study, as Dr. Hoff shares, has been replicated across multiple states. So there's entirely different populations. And so that is and it does make sense, right? Because we know that when we're tired, our reaction time is less and those kinds of things. And so there are other things beyond just school that the research would suggest would be very beneficial, but it's a huge leap. This is a huge leap for a lot of people. So again, the purpose of bringing this forward, I debated whether to bring forward a report because we are partially baked here, right? But we've committed to being transparent about it so that we make sure that we know where we're at in the process, what we're considering at this point, that you can steer me off if there's something that you think that's a non-starter, in terms of I need to hear that feedback. That's why we're bringing it to our faculty next. We have informed them through our staff newsletter, going back to when we had some of the first presentations in the committees last spring. But we're bringing it back. Here's how it might work. What are the kinds of concerns that people have there? Because We know that our employees are really important because they do a great job with our students and they're delivering a lot of the magic that happens every day. We have to consider their needs. We also have to make sure that as we go forward that parents have an opportunity to really tell us how it may impact them. We know a lot of secondary families have told us about really the gift that they feel Wednesday is, that 1 hour late start on Wednesday right now for their students to recoup. We've heard a lot of that kind of thing. We also know that we've heard that it's one of the reasons I've used the elementary school start time as a parameter, because we've also heard from families that that is something that can be a hassle for elementary parents. So we're really trying to listen to the feedback as we go through to try to present the best plan that you can make a decision on.
No, you had a question.
I have two questions. One is probably a sarcastic request, but what happens during daylight time? If we're adjusting the school calendar, or the school by, what, an hour? We should see some changes then when we go from daylight time to standard time and back and forth. Do we see anything in the student performance at that time?
I can't tell you that. No, I don't know the answer.
I didn't expect to have an answer tonight, but somebody should be studying that, because an hour difference then should make a difference, although it occurs during the time when we don't have school.
And then everybody adjusts.
Which is another reason to figure around education.
Right.
It's a different, another study.
Yes.
I do have another question.
I like that you give us studies to do. That always makes me happy.
I think this is for some families can accommodate. For some, it's going to be almost socially impossible to figure out how to accommodate this change. Because it doesn't necessarily change just the family adjusting their lifestyle. But in my case, I was working in Minneapolis. I had to be at work at 7 o'clock. And that left a whole lot of things different. I mean, I left the house at 6:15. Fortunately, my family wasn't up yet. But there are some socially difficult issues attached to this, which are going to be difficult to solve.
You're not going to get any argument from me on that, because there are dilemmas. I mean, that's really what it is. We've got some competing items, right? We've got some very clear medical research that talks about the physiological benefits, the academic, the social, emotional, the mental health benefits for teenagers, and we do have existing systems. That is what this is what does boil down to is.
The data is so compelling.
And that's the hard part. Yes.
The data is so compelling.
Great comments. Tom, you had yours, and then Ellen, I know, and then Jeff.
So I'm not totally sold on it yet, but so you refer to reports out of the University of Minnesota and whatnot. What are those reports? Could you send me a link at some point?
Yeah, we actually have a whole bibliography for you that we can provide in terms of sharing all of the original research that really, I think, broke this into the public eye was done at the University of Minnesota in the early 1990s, mid-1990s. So we have an entire bibliography of the research I'd be happy to share.
And then, so if school started an hour later, would the teachers' day start an hour later? And the reason I ask is we just passed their 2-year contract. Would we be limited by that contract when this could start?
So the teacher contract offers the ability for the board to set workday start time up to 45 minutes different than 7:30 a.m. So as we have modeled this, it is possible that it's not only possible, we are able to make the adjustment. What we're looking at is what would be the most effective way to do that in terms of providing that larger chunk of time at the beginning of the day. Right now, the secondary staff have a very short chunk at the beginning of the day, with the workday starting roughly at 7:30 and the first bell ringing at 7:45 and classes starting around 7:50 or so. And middle school is just a little bit later. But at the end of the day, they're done at 2:45 and they have a chunk of prep time that goes until approximately 3:30. The elementaries are somewhat reversed, and so the question would be, as we talk to the faculty and get some feedback about if we were to do this, what do we think the optimal workday would be? That's a piece that we want to make sure that we're getting feedback from our faculty to say, and our staff, what would be would we prefer to putting the chunk of time at the beginning of the day is a helpful thing for the teachers who coach, right? Because they would then, not miss faculty meetings or other kinds of trainings that we can only do right now at the end of the school day for the most part. That's one way, but that's the kind of thing that we really need the feedback from our employees to hear from them. What do they think the best way to modify that start time would be? That's going to be some of the purpose of the meetings that we host after MEA.
Ellen. So I don't know if this is already something that's, since this is half-baked, if like you're still waiting on the if this is still in the oven, kind of. But the guidelines for how student activities, I'm thinking about if there's no flex hour, and I know some of the student groups meet then, and some of the student groups meet on the Wednesdays and the late start before, we shift to the school day, but then if they're fill it up with the school meetings, rallies meetings, and DYC meets, and all of a sudden the a cappella group, or so just are we gonna, if we went forward with something like this, would we need to set some guidelines so that the students would actually have the benefit of this leave, or at least as much as we could make it that?
Yeah, so two pieces. First, I want to really emphasize that I'm not saying that we wouldn't have the flex hour. This year is actually the second of a 2-year trial run for the flex hour at the high school, after which the faculty would have to vote again, to extend that further. So I want to be very clear that I'm not saying we would or wouldn't have the flex hour. There are ways to make that happen. The question is that still something we want to do if we were to have this kind of schedule? So I want to be really clear, the flex isn't necessarily tied to this, but it could have an impact. So just to be really clear about that. The second part would be, yes, I would absolutely recommend that we set not just guidelines, but probably policy around what time could student activities start beforehand. Because exactly what the concern that Ellen shares is that we obviously don't want to have student activities starting at 7:30 or 7 a.m. if we're trying to make sure that students are able to get. Now we may just look at implementing what's the current approach. How much ahead of time do people meet currently, and do we look at, okay, if that might be something that you would want to consider, but we don't want to lose the part we don't want to lose the benefit of having that extra time for sleep. If we're really responding to the medical research, that would be the part I'd ask you to really consider is how we need not only to have guidelines, but I would articulate we would have to have policy, which is the most it's the most important thing that we have. It governs all the other practices and procedures that we have in place. So I do think that is something you're going to really need to consider if we go to this, because we just know what will happen. We know we will do it to ourselves, that we will eliminate what the benefit we had before it, or we have now of a later start time is. So we just want to be mindful of that. Again, there's a number of different things that we're working through, that being one of them, because we don't want to basically diminish the benefit that students would get by now stacking a 0 hour or other kinds of things in the morning. And to be clear too, there's a very fair point about, how do we have a real problem with kids being late to school? We don't, right? But you have to remember too that the large majority of our students are very compliant, right? So at our house, our children always knew we're up and out the door and we're ready to go, and that was just the way it has worked in our family. But we also know, if you talk to staff about their first hour classes, I greet students in the upper cafeteria every Monday morning, and there's a lot of sometimes blank stares early on that Monday morning, because we know that they're there because they're supposed to be there. It doesn't mean that they're there and ready to learn quite yet. And so that's just another factor, is that we need to think about that part, and we don't want to diminish what would be the positive impact of it by shooting ourselves in the foot, if you will.
Jeff?
Yeah, just curious, compared to what we do now as far as the time that students are able to get into the building, as opposed to what the change would be of when they're able to get in, and what are they going to do if they're early, study hall. Hopefully that they'd make that productive time, but I'm wondering how would that be, the times on that, and how would that be policed, for a lack of a better expression?
So our elementary schools generally have a hard time, and the elementary we're proposing wouldn't necessarily change. But those buildings don't open until 8 o'clock right now. So students aren't able to get in until at least 8 o'clock. Again, I'd set the elementary to the side at this point just because we're really trying to see how could we create something that would not dramatically shift things for elementary families. So right now, the buildings are, I can't tell you exactly what time the building is open. I can tell you it's very early. I can tell you it is certainly by 6:30, I would say, the main doors are open. And at the secondary level right now, what you have is you have basically students know the routine. Sometimes you might see a student who's there early outside of a teacher's classroom waiting for them to come for an appointment for some help. But most of the time at the middle school, just the layout of the building is such that, and the way that students have been taught, if you're there early, you sit in the cafeteria and there's some, our secretaries are there by 7 a.m. We don't really have formal supervision until around 7:30 or so, but there's passive supervision. The cafeteria folks are there, the custodians are, and we just have had very few problems in that early hour before school. It would be the same thing here at the high school. For the most part, what you would see is students who arrive early, for whatever reason, congregate in either the upper or lower cafeteria. From time to time, you'll see some students who might be, again, in a hallway outside of a teacher's classroom, waiting for their teacher. They may be engaged in something else, but for the most part, we are very lucky. Our kids are great. I mean, there's another way to say it. Our kids are great, and they understand where the common areas, they want to be with their friends, right? And that's where they can best do that if they're there early. I'll see some students who are there early who are working on some homework, or they are just waiting for the breakfast to open, prepare for the day. So right now, the building opens pretty early. And I don't see that changing, regardless of the start time, because it's not just about our students. We have hall walking and things like that for people sometimes early in the morning. It's open for staff and those kinds of things.
No.
I didn't realize the high school that I went to had such a leading edge in education. However, we had a start time at 9:15. And that opened up the opportunity for band, choir, photo club, newspaper club, and everything else to start at 8 o'clock. So it sort of defeated the purpose. And I'm not sure they even knew that. But what happened is by starting school a little bit later, then activities took up the first hour. So I was always at school by 7:45 anyhow.
And not uncommon, I know that you went to a rural school now, I mean, is not uncommon for a lot of rural schools, partially due to the dependence on agriculture at the time.
Yeah, of course, I was up milking the cows.
Yes. And while we still do have students who are involved in that, but the percentage of those students is very small comparatively today.
Excellent questions. Other questions or comments? So I had a couple of questions. I appreciate that we are having this discussion tonight. I think the report that Mary Grace Hampson did in June was really helpful, and this is taking a little bit deeper dive. And I think that articulating a lot of the nuts and bolts of how this is going to work is really good. I think one thing we talked about in June was that communication was really key, and really being able to, we have all of the research. Dr. Hoff came before the board in 2014, and so we have lived this research. We've understood it. We've seen nationwide what people are doing. We, as board members, are aware of this. That's been 5 years, so we know that a lot of the education is going to be really key. Why is this important, and why are we taking the time and effort to do this? I think it's really the strength where we are at now is that it's not a dramatic change to our elementary schools. I think that's really significant. I think we've seen other districts, as Jeff alluded, where there was a little bit more of an apple cart upset, and I think that always makes change more difficult. I think that we're not beholden to a start time. Well, we're not beholden to this at all. We have to really continue to review and understand how this could work, but we also are not have any preconceived notion of when this would be implemented. Whether it's fall of 20 or fall of 21 or 22, whatever it is, we're not looking at saying we need to have this in place by a certain time. I know that you are reviewing some statistics and some information with Benjamin Bus.
Yep.
One of them being, as you know, we can't afford, it is too, in the guise of, or in the goal of cost neutral, we can't send out 2 buses to the rural community. We would be looking at $800,000 plus to be at a different tier bus system than we are. So we know that going out to the rural community once to get all of our kids, including high school. So I know they're looking at the number of kids, high school kids who actually ride the bus versus those who are eligible. So there is the assumption, somewhat of an assumption, that most of our high school kids drive, as we evidenced by our packed parking lots, but we know that's not necessarily the case. So that would be a good thing for us to have. I think that the parent meetings, starting with the staff and then going to our community parents, you're talking about some meetings in November, which I think will be great. Will there be other opportunities for parents to give feedback without having to necessarily come to a meeting, which we know can be?
Yeah, so typically, as you know, whenever we've done this kind of public process, we have always included some kind of digital option for feedback. And so we are going to try to model the same process that we have done with other things in the past. So giving people that option for digital feedback as well. What we will do is we will most likely record, there will be of course with those information meetings, there will be a short presentation. We will most likely record part of that short presentation so that we are able to make sure that people have a chance to hear and see exactly what we're talking about prior to providing feedback. So that is something we certainly will do. If you remember, we actually had 2 years ago, Ray Coudre's statistics class actually did a cold call kind of study on this about, and we know that people at that point were receptive to it given the initial. So now it's about, here's exactly what we'd be looking at. What is the feedback that you have? We'll give you all of the comments that come our way so that you have a chance to make sure that you hear from as many people who have an interest. And then it will be your job to make a determination whether we move forward, and if we move forward, when would you want us to move forward, and are there any other parameters that you would want us to have in making any kind of change. But I applaud you for asking for the information and thinking it through, because the research, as Noel says, is compelling, and it is scientific medical research, which is different from survey research and things like that. So I think when we know that we have a strategy that doesn't require any kind of special professional development, doesn't require any kind of specialized, grouping of students or a particular curricular resource that we know would have some positive benefit, it's our job to take a look at that and then determine, is that something that we can do here? There are lots of things that we know have some solid research, some of which we're able to do, some of which we're not. But we know that when it comes to thinking about changing our schedule, that's a big decision. And so I'm grateful that we're taking the time for the discussion, and I want to make sure that you have the benefit of what we're thinking about as we go through it, so that by the time we get to a point of whether you make a decision to move forward or not, you feel like you've been informed along the way, and that people who choose to watch the board video or get the information have the chance to see your comments and the things that you're thinking about.
Excellent. Lastly, I agree, and I think the board has found great benefit to having work sessions, so I think we would look forward to doing that. Would you have a sense for a timing of a work session?
What I am looking at would most likely be in after the first meeting in November. So sometime between the first meeting in November and the second meeting in November.
Okay.
That's what the goal would be.
Okay. So we'll watch we'll work with getting those dates, and we'll watch we'll be able to get a consensus of a good meeting date or a good work session date. Okay, any other questions? A great discussion. I think lots of work being done as board members have questions or comments as they are thinking about this. If they can get those to Dr. Hillman or Anita, so those get part of the discussion as we move forward. I think that would be great. Excellent, thank you. All right, so that is our last item for discussion. We'll move on now to approval of the consent grouping. As a reminder, there were a few personnel items in the table file, and then a couple of other items that were in the table file, as you saw. So is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping? Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Moved by Ellen. Is there a second? Second by Amy. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We will look now to items for individual action. We have a few this evening. The first one is the request to hire additional non-licensed special ed EA PCA that Director of Special Ed Education Cheryl Hall was here presenting at our last board meeting. So is there a motion to hire additional non-licensed special education EA PCA at a projected cost of $70,640 with approximately 55% of the salary reimbursed through special education revenue for a net cost of $50,707? Is there a motion? Moved by Rob. Is there a second? Second by Ellen. Okay, so questions or comments as a follow-up to Director Cheryl Hall's presentation last week? Tom? Last meeting.
55% of reimbursed salary is only 20,000 out of 70?
So Val, when we look at that, it's like, well, the $70,000 is a combination of salary and benefits, and we're only able to get reimbursement on the salary.
Okay.
Yeah, excellent question. Any other questions or comments? That was a great catch. All you math whizzes can look at that and catch that right away. So excellent. So we have a motion and a second, and no other discussion. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, no.
I want to just express my appreciation that the district and the support of the district allows us to be able to do this without having to force class sizes or other issues that would be a problem. So I really appreciate it.
Excellent comment. Thank you, Noel. Okay, so any other questions, comments? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Our second item is something that we do routinely for application to Minnesota State High School League Foundation. So is there a motion to approve the resolution of a school board supporting Form A application to Minnesota State High School League Foundation? That information was in your packet. Is there a motion? Moved by Ellen. Is there a second? Second by Jeff. This is a resolution, so it requires a roll call vote. Anita?
Gurwitz? Aye. Hardy?
Aye.
Stratmon?
Aye.
Cornell?
Aye.
Brania?
Aye.
Iverson? Aye. Pritchard?
Aye. Motion carries. Our third item for individual action is a resolution establishing combined polling places. We are not anticipating an election. There is a very unlikely that we will have any sort of special election, but just to have the opportunity if something should occur that we would have this option for combined polling places. We did this action last year, and as required by the state, we need to do this on a yearly basis. So is there a motion to approve the resolution establishing combined polling places for multiple precincts and designating hours during which the polling places will remain open for voting for school district elections not held on the date of a statewide election? Is there a motion? Moved by Tom. Is there a second? Second by Ellen. Any questions or comments on this? We have a motion and a second. This is also a roll call vote.
Gurwitz? Aye. Hardy?
Aye.
Stratmon?
Aye.
Cornell?
Aye.
Brania?
Aye.
Iverson? Aye. Pritchard?
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, that is our items for individual action. So we will move now to items for information. Dr. Hillman, we have our first enrollment report.
Yeah, so in your packet, what you will see is, as you know, in the month of September, we take weekly readings, and we show you what our enrollment is at this point. And by October 1, of course, that's a big watershed moment for us, because this is what in general, a lot of our funding will be based upon. As you know, there's a 3-year process of cleaning that up. But what you'll see is the grand total is at 4,123 pupils. And if you look at if you exclude Our early childhood and part-time or independent study ALC students, we are at 3953 for that October 1st reading.
Excellent. Questions, comments? Jeff?
Just curious on, any future predictions we have. I mean, we've been at, K through 12 for $4,000 for many years back, and it's projected for, moving forward. Are you hearing anything more as far as projections forward for student increases, decreases?
So what we've seen right now is if we look at the number, I'm going to look at the number that's excluding ALC, independent study students, and the early childhood, so that 3953 that I mentioned. When we compare to what we had at the end of last year, we were at 3964.5, so about a 14, or about a 13 and a half student difference. How do you have a half-time student? There are times where we have students who are only enrolled part-time for various different reasons. So right now we're down a little bit, compared to last year. What we're finding is that, do you remember when Hazel, we've had an increase in the last several years in our student enrollment. We know that that was a piece that had for several years, as Jeff mentioned, we've been seeing it tick up a bit. But we've also always had in the back of our mind, if you remember, Hazel Reinhardt came in 2013, I believe it was, and gave us a 10-year projection model, in which she had projected that over time, we would see a slight decrease of a couple of hundred students over a decade period of time. And she predicted that what we would see would be some reduction in the elementary numbers, along with a corresponding increase in some of the secondary numbers. And that is where we're at. So we have seen an increase in our secondary numbers this year. Specifically, we had quite a few new enrollees right at the end of the summer into the first week of school. But we are seeing our elementaries be smaller in general than what they have before. Not a bad thing to have, because we have some of the better class sizes that we've had in some time. That's a good thing. But we have to be mindful that enrollment is different than demographics, right? And so when we think about what Hazel had said, over the 10 years, she may end up being dead on. Now, it has taken a different path than what she originally said. And I'd ask Val to chime in. She is helpful with she does the enrollment projection for us. So I think it's fair to say we are on target with Hazel's predictions are coming true, even though we have seen some additional increase than she had even predicted at the secondary level.
Yep, that would be accurate. Other questions on the enrollment report? I'm sorry, Rob, go ahead.
I think I found what I was curious about. The second page says 913, so that's why the ALC numbers and other numbers are different on the second page.
Correct.
So those aren't the October 1st.
Correct.
Yeah, I think that it's really interesting when you look, we know that we have a lot of, students that come to us in the secondary, and we're graduating 303 students in our kindergarten class of 248 is small in comparison to, where we have been. So the Hazel Reinhardt study is really bearing out, and I think I just did the math quick, and it looks like I know our average class size at the elementary is 23 and a half for class size, so 23, 24 children. So, and we only had 10 sections in the entire district where there was over 25 students in a section. So I think or in a class. So I think that's for our elementary. That's one thing that we know is important to our families is class size, and we're seeing, I think, Noel, what you said about our community supporting the work that we do, that we're able to have these class sizes at the elementary level is just really, really good. And I know there's not a lot of districts that have those class sizes at the elementary level, so we're very fortunate.
And to be clear too, Val and I are watching this very carefully. As you know, we've often used very conservative enrollment projections because we would always rather underestimate than overestimate. But we are watching because we do have the enrollment has clearly slowed down for several years in a row. For probably 5 or 6 years, we were seeing some pretty substantial increases every year, especially compared to what we had ended the year with. So we're seeing that slow, which that has some positive effect. The class size pieces that Julie had mentioned. But at the same time, some of the increases, as we talked with you before, are requiring some additional support services that, we may not have had to use in the past. And so we're constantly watching. It's not just about the number of students, it's about the services that they need and trying to make sure that we're projecting, are we starting to see some declining enrollment? Because we are in a unique positive position to plan for that, right? Because we have really built our fund balance to a point to weather that kind of uncertainty. But we're very careful about making sure that we're not just looking at these numbers, setting it and forgetting it. You know that we give you a monthly report. You know that we have modified the way that we report that to you over the years because of the fact that we want to make sure we're giving you what we think is the most accurate number to project our funding, if that makes sense.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Good questions. Next item for information, construction update number 15. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, so a couple of items that are things that I want you to be aware of. We are working through right now the core planning teams. Those core planning teams are completed at the existing Greenvale Park renovation as well as at Longfellow School for the district office move into the first floor and the lower floor at Longfellow School. The next step for those two areas will be the user groups. And again, as you know, this is our fourth and fifth process. So the user groups really get down to the very detailed level of where's the light switch and where does a desk go and those kinds of things. So we started to work through that before we would get to the bidding component there as they start to really get the nitty-gritty of the drawings done. I want to point out that we are looking at a Sibley bid opening tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. so far, and the two bids that we've opened so far, both of those bids have come in under the projected construction budget. That's very good for us. I want to point out that this Wednesday, October 16th, we are hosting a community neighborhood informational meeting along with Knudsen Construction. What we did is we used our Guide K-12 software and we drew a circle around the neighborhood, roughly 4 blocks or so. It was 311 residences that we had addresses for that we sent a postcard to people to encourage them if they have an interest in coming. Really what we're trying to do in this meeting is offer an opportunity for people who live in the neighborhood to come and ask any questions that they might have about the construction. Maybe they see, hey, why is this fence there? Or what happened over here? So this is part of the work that Knudsen Construction does. This is the first of several that we will do. They will also share with people an email address that they can contact should they have any questions in the interim. We have been very pleased with the Knudsen Construction Management firm so far. They've been very responsive to questions that people from the neighborhood have had. And if you remember, when they pitched themselves as the construction management firm, this was one of the core reasons that we felt they were just a leg above others, is that community engagement that they had. So we're really pleased with that. There are 2 parts that are we have some concerns about right now. One, all of the Bridgewater construction is on target. The way the office is being built, the windows, the drive, they're actually planning to pave the driveway this weekend, so we should see that traffic return to normal, what it did before the school year, very quickly after MEA. But we have a very important piece of equipment that is on back order. It's the air handling unit for the office. And so the project oversight committee, and on that project oversight committee we have Julie and Noel, as well as Val Murdesdorf, who sits on that, and Jim Kalseth from our office. And we had a decision to make. We anticipate that air handling unit is going to arrive sometime in the 2nd, 3rd week in November is what it's on track for right now. So it was a somewhat minimal cost to have installed a temporary air handling unit that we could have moved the office in as projected over the MEA break. However, what would need to happen is we would actually, when the air handling unit came, we would have to move all those people back out of the office for up to 4 days while the air handling unit is installed. And so you can't run a place without an air handling unit anymore. So the dilemma that the project oversight committee dealt with was that, we are going to delay the opening of that office. Now, once that paving is done, the entrance is near complete, we will be able to go back to using the main entrance. They just won't go through the new office quite yet. We would still use a greeter like we've been using since the beginning of the school year. So it's a piece that we would prefer not to have happened, but we looked at the data, we looked at what was the best circumstance for the school. We can return quite a bit of convenience back to parents by not having the rerouted traffic, which will happen relatively soon after MEA break, but we will just have to wait a bit to open the office formally. And so that's, of course, going to do a little bit of a delay of the work on the special education suite that's going to go into the current office, though Knudsen Construction tells us that they don't believe it will be a dramatic change in that schedule. So that's the first piece. The other thing is just that we want to make sure that people are aware of is that we did have to approve a change order. We used the process that you had developed for us on how to make change orders up to a certain amount of money. I've shared this with you in an email just so you had the information. But when the new Greenvale Park site, when they did those initial soil testings back in the summer, they passed all of the different tests for using the soil on site, the fill on site as some for the soil compaction underneath the footprint of the building. Well, I don't think we've had quite a foot of rain, but maybe we've had a foot of rain, over the last several months, and that really changed the nature of the clay. Now, apparently the clay it's usable in almost all circumstances unless it gets tremendously wet, which it did. We looked at three strategies. We looked at continuing to try to dry the clay, which a lot of clay would have dried this week. We looked at trucking in a bunch of sand. 8,000 yards of sand is what we could have done to be able to address that concern immediately. And based on the recommendation of Knudsen Construction, what we did is we brought in, I think it's roughly 4,000 yards of sand at about $125,000 of a change order. Now we have a contingency fund. It's exactly what the contingency fund is for. What Josh Cooper, our person at Knudsen, would say is that the rain and the moisture has put them behind a little bit. They have confidence that they will be able to catch up. You get a few nice days like we had this week, they can make a lot of progress each day. If you go by Greenvale Park, they're there very early in the morning, and we've been there to where they are there as the sun is setting. So there's a lot of work. It's not that we're terribly concerned about the schedule right now, but we just, again, in the effort to be transparent, the rain has really caused them a lot of fits, if you will, over the last couple of weeks. So those are the major updates between the last time that we met and now. Well, we will also modify this construction update to separate out the Bridgewater office and the renovation piece so that you can see how that's working as we complete one project in the next month or so and continue on. So we'll be just changing that up for you. So those are the updates on the construction at this point, and I'd be happy to stay in for any questions.
Tom?
Not a question. I saw that the city put out a notice that the road in front of the new elementary school will be closed from just where you turn to Linden Street to the west entrance to the Greenvale from Thursday through Monday morning for construction related.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great timing for our community meeting Wednesday evening.
Yep.
Be able to
Good.
explain that and look through anything there. Amy?
I have two questions. This is on. One is, with all that sand, will that make for a long-term benefit where there'll be better soil condition for drainage or whatever for the foundation? And so, or is it just more we needed the short-term benefits of them being able to get the construction going?
I don't know the answer to that. So I don't know about the additional drainage, if that would be a case. What we approved it as is to be able to make sure that we were able to keep the work schedule on target.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering whether it might actually have been a really good thing, not just a good thing.
As you know, I don't have an agronomy degree, or that's not my strength, and so I understand what they're telling me, and I'm able to repeat it back to them and understand what they're at. But I don't personally have a knowledge of the drainage, but I can ask Josh Cooper that and get that information to you.
I would be curious if you get a good chance to ask.
Yep.
It's not.
Well, we see him pretty regularly, so it's not a problem.
And then my second question is, when you're done with Bridgewater, are you planning any ribbon cutting ceremony or grand reopening somehow, or?
Yes, we just have not gotten those. We need to know when it's going to open before we can
Right.
have at least an open house.
Okay, excellent, great, thanks.
Great questions. Other questions? So our next item for information, the community meeting, which we have said is this Wednesday evening at 4:30 p.m. in the Media Center at Greenville Park Elementary School. I think it's really great that 311 postcards went out to those people in the neighborhood affected, and I think that was a strength of Knutson Construction, was their ability to communicate and really have stakeholders really know what's happening with in and around their neighborhood as the construction takes place. Future meetings, we have, as we discussed at our last board meeting, our next board meeting is Monday, October 28th, which will be, prior to that, we will have the World's Best Workforce presentation that we do annually at 6:15 right here in the High School Media Center. So then we will move right into the regular school board meeting. It is that time of year again. Retired Educators Luncheon is scheduled for Wednesday, October 30th. At 11:30 a.m. opening the doors. Noon is lunch at Ruth's on Stafford. Board members should have received a postcard in the mail, and I think, Anita, you're looking for RSVPs by October 23rd. Okay, so if you can look at your schedules for that Wednesday, October 30th, if you're able to attend and RSVP to Anita by the 23rd of the month, that would be great. Future meetings. We do have a special board meeting. Thank you to board members freeing their schedules in order for us to have that special board meeting on Monday, October 21st at 5 p.m. The only agenda item there will be to approve the Sibley bids, which will be open tomorrow, so that again that construction can move forward. I think, as you see from the chart, hoping to break ground in Sibley in November. Then regular school board meeting on Monday, October 28th, again preceded by the World's Best Workforce presentation at 6:15, all the way into November. Tuesday, November 12th, that is because Monday, November 11th is Veterans Day, so we will meet that Tuesday, November 12th, and we do have early advance notice of the National Merit Reception, which we will have at 6 p.m. prior to our meeting on Tuesday, November 12th in the High School Media Center. Has National Merit finalists been released yet?
I know that they were going out last week. I saw that the semifinalists had been printed in the paper a few weeks back, and I know that we have one semifinalist, and then I have not heard yet the number of commended students, but I can tell you I saw Principal Laura K. Allen signing all of the commended student letters at the volleyball game last week, so we know those invitations are going out as well.
Okay, excellent. So that is future meetings, lots happening between community meetings and special board meetings and workforce and National Merit Reception. So thank you to everyone for the extra time that these meetings will take over the course of the next 6 weeks. So with that, I ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Noel. Is there a second? Second by Amy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.